On a freezing Monday morning, a young woman from a struggling neighborhood was on her way to the most important job interview of her life. But suddenly, along the way, she boarded a packed city bus and saw an old man, standing with no place to sit. Even though her legs were tired and her nerves were on edge, she gave up her only seat without hesitation. What she didn't know was that the old man was the powerful, silent owner of the very company she was interviewing with. What happened next changed her life forever. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The bus was already packed when Leah stepped on, her heels clicking against the grimy floor, her breath catching slightly from the short sprint she'd made to catch it. It was too early for this much chaos, but that's how city mornings worked. Unforgiving, loud, indifferent to nerves or dreams. She adjusted the strap of her worn-out leather bag and scanned the sea of blank faces, bodies swaying in rhythm with the jerking vehicle. A narrow space opened up beside a man glued to his phone, and she slipped into it, grateful even if her knees still pressed awkwardly against the back of someone else's coat. Her heart pounded beneath her buttoned blouse, not just from the run, but from everything riding on this day. The interview, the agency, the chance to finally stop hearing we went with someone more experienced. This wasn't just another job, it was the one she'd rehearsed for in the mirror, rewrote her resume for 4 times, stayed up all night Googling marketing case study questions for. It was everything. The bus jolted forward, and Leah tightened her grip on the bar in front of her, steadying herself with one hand while thumbing the folded corner of her portfolio with the other. She'd triple-checked it last night, custom cover letter, printed copies of her resume, samples of her ad mock-ups. Everything clean, aligned, and sharp. She'd even ironed her blouse at 5 a.m., something she hadn't done since graduation. This moment had to go right. It was the last interview she could afford to make it to this month. And if this didn't pan out, she didn't want to think about what came next. The stoplight ahead turned red. The bus sighed and groaned to a halt. As the doors creaked open, a gust of cold morning air swept in, followed by the slow, careful movements of an elderly man climbing up the steps. His gray overcoat hung damp from the light rain, his cane wobbling with each uneven step. He didn't ask for help, didn't complain, but it was clear the climb took everything he had. And as he finally reached the main aisle, his eyes searched the bus in vain for a place to sit. No one looked up. A teenager turned his face to the window. A woman with AirPods in tugged her scarf higher. Everyone pretended not to see. But she saw the way the man's hand trembled slightly on the pole. Saw the quiet exhaustion in his eyes. Saw, most of all, the kind of weariness that wasn't just physical. It was the kind that came from a lifetime of being overlooked. And in that split second, despite the ache in her feet, despite the weight of her own world pressing on her shoulders, she stood, wordless, instinctive. She simply stood, stepped aside, and gestured gently. The man looked stunned at first, then quietly nodded, offering a soft thank you as he lowered himself slowly into the seat she'd just vacated. She gave him a faint smile, then gripped the cold pole, her legs stiffening slightly to keep balance as the bus lurched forward again. Did she regret it? Maybe for a moment. Her shoes pinched mercilessly. Her arm ached from holding the pole. The damp coat clinging to her back itched with irritation. But somewhere in the middle of that discomfort, something settled inside her. A calmness, a quiet affirmation that she still recognized the kind of person she wanted to be, even when no one was watching. And yet, what Leah didn't know What no one on that bus knew was that the old man she just gave her seat to wasn't a stranger in any ordinary sense. He was far more than that, but that truth, that would reveal itself in time. Leah Carter was 24, but some days she felt closer to 40. Not because of wrinkles or time, but because of the quiet exhaustion that came from trying every single day to prove she was worth something in a world that rarely looked her way. She'd graduated with honors, top of her class in communications, but that hadn't translated into job offers. Not in a city like this. Not when you came from nowhere special, with no fancy internships or family friends at marketing firms. Just a cheap laptop, a part-time barista job, and a single mother who gave up everything so Leah could chase something more. Job hunting had become its own kind of full-time work. Dozens of applications, too many, we regret to inform you emails, and a shrinking pool of optimism. Each rejection added weight to her shoulders. But this interview, it was different. Madison and Halloway wasn't just a company, it was the company. Known citywide, bold campaigns, real clients. A foot in the door there meant not just a job, but a future. She'd prepared like her life depended on it, because in some ways it did. She triple-checked her portfolio, practiced answers to behavioral questions in the mirror until her voice cracked, set 5 alarms, laid out her best clothes, even though the blazer had a tiny tear inside the seam and the shoes pinched. But morning had other plans. Her phone had died overnight. 3 alarms never went off. The sun was already creeping through the window when her eyes flew open. She flew through her routine, brushing teeth and zipping her portfolio at once, skipping breakfast, praying the train was delayed. It wasn't. She reached the station just in time to see it pulling away. Her chest tightened as she stood on the platform, frozen between panic and problem-solving. The next train wouldn't get her there in time. The bus was her only option, so she ran down cracked sidewalks and across puddle-filled intersections, until the bus came into view. And in those last seconds before it arrived, Leah did what she'd always done. She pushed forward. Not perfect, not polished, just prepared enough to keep trying. And that's how she boarded that crowded bus, with everything on the line. The bus wheezed to a stop as Leah climbed aboard, her pulse still elevated from the run, the sting of a missed train still fresh in her chest. She moved past the aisle of swaying strangers, her fingers clenched tightly around the fraying strap of her thrifted purse. Inside it, her resume folder bulged at the corners, its edges soft and slightly bent from overuse. Her heels pinched with every step, her blouse clung to her back, and her coat hung limp from the drizzle outside. Everything about her screamed effort, carefully assembled, barely holding together. Most passengers didn't even look up. Phones lit their faces. Music drowned out the engine's roar. She exhaled in relief when she spotted a vacant seat near the middle and collapsed into it, trying not to wrinkle her skirt more than it already was. For a moment, she allowed herself a second to breathe. Just one moment to gather the version of herself she needed to be. Then the bus jerked again and opened its doors. She looked up as an elderly man stepped on, slow, hunched, and leaning heavily on a cane. His hat was tilted from the wind, his coat draped with quiet dignity despite being damp. He paused at the top step, searching for a seat. No one moved, no one acknowledged him. Eyes stayed fixed on screens. Some passengers even turned away. Leah didn't hesitate. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She stood and offered the seat with a gentle nod, her hand barely gesturing. He blinked, surprised. Then he smiled. a soft, sincere smile that barely touched his lips but warmed his entire face. "Thank you, young lady," he said, his voice weathered but kind. She shrugged it off like it was nothing. "You're welcome." They didn't speak much after that. He settled beside her, and she gripped the overhead bar as the bus resumed its rhythm. But as he adjusted his coat and leaned slightly forward with a faint sigh, she noticed something. His eyes, steady, calm, observant, like he saw things most people missed. She thought of him as just another stranger on a crowded morning. But something about his quiet presence stayed with her. She had no idea he already knew her name. By the time Leah reached the building, her breath was short and sharp, her chest rising and falling in uneven gasps as she stared up at the tower of glass and steel. It looked like it belonged in another world. The revolving doors spun endlessly with confident people in dry suits, perfect hair, polished shoes. She caught her reflection in the glass before walking in, creased blouse, frizzy hair, sweat along her brow, and a single raindrop sliding off the tip of her nose. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Inside, the lobby hummed with quiet authority. Cold marble floors clicked with expensive shoes. The receptionist barely looked up when Leah approached, her eyes flicking briefly over the wet streaks on her coat, before nodding toward the elevators. 15th floor, they're expecting you." Her voice made it sound like a courtesy, like the expectation had already faded. Leah stepped into the elevator and tried to fix herself in the mirror. She dabbed at her forehead with a tissue, straightened her skirt, smoothed her flyaways. When the doors opened, she walked into the waiting room with her heart pounding and her fingers damp against the leather folder. The receptionist outside the conference room looked at the clock, then at her. "You're 3 minutes late." "I'm so sorry," Leah began, but the woman was already on the phone, announcing her arrival. The interview started cold. Mr. Grantham, the hiring manager, didn't smile. He motioned for her to sit and immediately jumped into a list of rapid-fire questions. She tried to keep up, answering with the responses she'd rehearsed, but something felt off. Her voice shook. Her answers landed flat. When he asked about her marketing project, she opened the folder and froze. Water damage. Her resume had bled at the edges. The neatly printed charts were smudged, wrinkled, imperfect. Her eyes flicked up. He was already frowning. The rest was a blur. She stumbled through a half-finished sentence about digital outreach. He cut her off. She tried to pivot, but the rhythm was broken. Every moment stretched, heavy with disappointment. When it ended, she shook his hand, thanked him with as much poise as she could fake, and walked out with her head high, until the elevator doors closed and her shoulders dropped. She had blown it, all of it, and no one would ever know how hard she tried. Leah sat curled on the edge of her twin mattress, still in her damp blouse, her resume folder tossed face down on the floor beside her. The silence in the apartment was heavier than usual. No TV, no music, no distractions, just the quiet hum of the fridge and the soft creak of her mom moving in the next room. Too polite to ask how it went. Leah hadn't told her. What was there to say? She'd missed her shot. The job was gone, the effort wasted. Her phone buzzed once, an unknown number. She stared at it. Probably a spam call. Or maybe another rejection voicemail. She let it ring once more, then picked it up, more out of reflex than hope. "Hello." There was a pause, then a voice, warm, calm, familiar. "Miss Carter? This is Harold Grayson." She blinked. The name didn't register at first, but the tone did. That voice, it was him, the man from the bus. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. "I believe we met earlier today, though under different circumstances," he continued, his voice laced with amusement. "I was the one lucky enough to receive your seat this morning." Leah sat up straighter, heart racing. "You're calling me?" "I am. I wanted to thank you again, but more than that, I wanted to extend an invitation. I'd like you to come back to our office tomorrow. No suit, no rehearsed answers, just yourself. Consider it a different kind of interview." She swallowed hard. "Wait, you work at Madison and Holloway?" Another pause, almost playful. "I don't just work there, Miss Carter. I built it. I'm the founder and the majority owner." Her breath caught in her throat. "I was in the office today," he added. "I saw how things went. But more importantly, I saw something no resume could ever reveal. Integrity, decency, courage to act when no one's watching. Those things matter to me." Leah didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. "We'll see you at 10? She managed a breath, barely a whisper. Yes, sir, I'll be there." And just like that, the day she thought had ended in failure was just beginning. The next morning, Leah stood once again in front of the Madison and Holloway building. But this time her hands didn't shake. The sunlight reflected off the tower's mirrored windows, and instead of towering over her like a challenge, it shimmered like an invitation. She stepped through the revolving doors, clutching her folder. Not because she needed to prove anything, but because it reminded her of the girl who kept showing up, even when the world told her not to. The front desk receptionist looked up and smiled, as if expecting her. "Mr. Grayson is waiting on the executive floor. Take the private elevator." The words felt unreal. Moments later, Leah stepped out into a world she'd only ever imagined. Open glass walls, quiet halls, curated art, the kind of place where decisions shaped entire industries. But it wasn't intimidating now. Not with Harold Grayson standing at the end of the corridor, smiling as if welcoming family. "Miss Carter," he said warmly, extending his hand, "I'm glad you came." They sat in a sunlit office that didn't feel like an office. No interrogation, no clipboard, just two people talking. He didn't ask about her resume. He didn't test her knowledge of market trends. He asked who she was, what she loved, what she feared, why she kept trying. She spoke honestly about her mother, about rejection, about learning to stretch every dollar and still find a way to dream. She told him how she wanted to tell stories that made people feel seen. Marketing wasn't just ads to her, it was connection. When she paused, unsure if she'd said too much, Harold simply nodded. "I built this company," he said, "to find people like you. Not perfect on paper, but extraordinary in heart." She blinked, unsure how to absorb that. "We have a mentorship program," he continued, "rare, selective. You won't be fetching coffee. You'll be learning directly from our core team. I'd like to offer you a place." For a moment, Leah forgot how to breathe. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because character," Harold said gently, "is what holds up the resume when the ink runs." She left the building not with a job offer, but with something better. A doorway to the future she'd almost stopped believing was possible. Leah didn't start her first day at Madison and Holloway with a corner office or a title to boast about. But what she did walk into was something far rarer. An open door earned not by privilege or perfection, but by presence. She was no longer just another resume in a stack, no longer the girl overlooked in a crowded room. She was seen, she was valued, she was chosen for something deeper than credentials. And as she stepped into that new world, she carried with her the same spirit that made her stand on that bus in the first place. In the end, it wasn't her GPA or her polished portfolio that changed her life. It was a quiet moment, barely noticed by others, where she chose kindness over comfort. That one simple act, done without expectation, became the reason everything changed. Because the truth is, people reveal who they are when no one is watching. And sometimes the smallest gesture, a seat offered, a smile given, a hand extended, echoes louder than any qualification ever could. So if you ever wonder whether kindness matters, remember Leah. And remember this: the world may not always notice your resume, but it never forgets your character.